Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Tim Derek, and today we're going to be analyzing some economic and agricultural policy initiatives to promote sustainable international development. So what is the problem? Why do people think about this, work in this field? What is the deal? The deal is that food insecurity and the nutritional deficiencies that it causes is one of the leading and most preventable sources of stunted growth and death for humans in least developed countries and developed countries alike. This problem is only going to get greater in severity as the global population continues to rise and agricultural systems are being put under stress due to climate change and natural resource degradation. We kind of live in an interesting time in the world because our agricultural systems produce enough food to feed everyone, but clearly that's not the outcome that we see. That's due to some key inefficiencies in our food systems, such as food waste, unsustainable agricultural practices, and inequitable trade and distribution systems. Those bottom two factors will be ones that we're going to pay careful attention to during this presentation today. This is a really complex issue, a broad issue to address. So I want to focus in on some key questions to ask when addressing this problem of international food insecurity and development. So those questions include what factors underlie sustainable agricultural systems and what are some policies we could put in place to promote those practices. I also wanted to think about what economic trade conditions promote sustainable international development and what that may look like in a real world context. There are obviously a whole lot of factors that underlie sustainable agriculture, as many of you know. The ones that we most commonly think of are agricultural inputs, such as land, labor, capital, seed, machinery, things like that. But I wanted to focus in on some factors that we might not think of as often that have huge impacts on sustainable agriculture. One of those is human capital. In the agricultural system, human capital development looks like farmer education services or a cooperative extension that trains farmers how to farm better using their available resources. I read a study that said that focused on some least developed countries, or LDCs as I'll refer to them throughout this presentation. Some LDCs since the 1990s that have invested in human capital development and seen larger economic growth than other LDCs who were focusing on investing in agricultural inputs. That was a surprising find for me, but it made sense thinking about how crucial human capital development is in the agricultural industry. I saw similar results in technology development and adoption in the agricultural industry abroad. And some other really important factors are agricultural research, political stability, and natural resource conservation to promote sustainable agriculture long term. Obviously, there are many, many more factors underlying production, but strong agricultural policies focused on sustainable development will take a comprehensive approach to these factors and pay special attention to crucial intersectionalities at play. For example, a nation could legalize use of new technologies such as drones in agriculture, but if they don't develop the human capital and training agriculturalists how to use those drones properly, that passing of the law, that policy action to legalize the drones will have really no meaningful impact on agricultural development in that nation. I then shifted my focus from understanding the factors to seeing what this looks like in the real world setting. So I did a case study focusing on agricultural development in Uganda. Uganda is listed as an LDC and it exists in Eastern Africa and the Great Lakes region, as you can see on the map there. Uganda has been such an interesting thing for me to investigate as far as international development is concerned, because they're really serious about focusing on this. In 1997, they launched the Poverty Eradication Action Plan, which the government hoped to modernize their agricultural systems and capitalize on some comparative advantage they had for production of cash crops, such as coffee. The government also wants to foster national economic welfare growth by increasing participation of the poor into their economy. And then in order to do that, they know that they need to promote macroeconomic stability of prices and exchange rates and things like that. I did an investigation on some of the priority areas of some international humanitarian organizations working in developmental agriculture, and their priority areas align really, really closely with the ones we see here in the Poverty Eradication Action Plan. Uganda has also taken a strict regimen at liberalizing their trade policies. They, in the most recent decades, have removed export taxes and abolished price controls that they had that really hampered economic and agricultural growth in their nation. They also officially joined the World Trade Organization in 1994, And due to some clauses in World Trade Organization legislation, they can be treated as a most favored nation by their trading partners that are developed nations because they're classified as an LDC by the United Nations. They also are an interesting state, Uganda is, for what the outcomes of the Doha round of negotiations will be, which is the most recent round of negotiations the WTO underwent. The Doha round is really focused on international development, especially when it comes to agriculture. And Uganda is definitely ahead of the wave when it comes to LDCs developing their agricultural systems and their trade policies. So the Doha round would definitely be doing a lot to catch up other LDCs to where Uganda is at, which would actually kind of negatively impact their advantage that they already have been experiencing recently since undertaking these policies. So they kind of mixed results as to what they hope to see from the Doha rounds, which is really interesting for me to find. Uganda also participates in some preferential trade agreements and have become more active in those agreements in recent years since they undertook these trade liberalization policies. They're part of the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa, and they export many cash crops, especially coffee, to the European Union. You can see in these two graphs provided by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. The one on the left shows Ugandan exports and where they're going to, and you can see that as the years progress, the diversity of their export destinations have increased, especially with the COMESA preferential trade agreement growing to be a larger percentage and the European Union eventually shrinking. And the graph on the right shows the import destinations. Obviously, a lot of them are coming from their neighboring African countries, some from Asia and some from the European Union as well. Another interesting thing I found corresponding with the trade liberalization policies, there's been an increase in foreign direct investment in Uganda. So the private industry has also been developed as well, leading up to in the end of the 20th century, a FDI valued at 222 million US dollars. I also found some new policies Uganda has been undertaking. They've invested in research, which is one of those factors we discussed earlier. They've developed centers to research diseases facing their cash crops, such as coffee wilt. They've also really focused in on adopting new technologies to promote sustainable agriculture. They've been involved in the debate surrounding legalizing genetically modified crops in developing nations, which there's mixed opinions about. But since they have legalized GM crops in their nation, they went from only one state-run seed company to currently 24 private-run companies that have now released 89 varieties of corn seed, leading to more efficient technologies available to farmers as well. They also are really serious about education and extension services, like we talked about earlier. In 2016, they passed the National Agricultural Extension Policy and Strategy, which launched a cohort of 1,750 extension officers to really develop the agricultural workers and markets alike in Uganda.